Chapter 1. The day my family turned me into a liability. I never imagined the day my own family would take me to court, freeze my access to my father's trust, and sit in silence as I was painted as the problem. My name is Claire, and this is not a story about screaming or revenge. It's about what happened when I stayed quiet long enough for the truth to speak. Because in that courtroom, one document and one sentence from my own mother changed everything. And by the time the judge looked up, my family realized I was never the liability they claimed I was. I learned the sound of betrayal before anyone said my name out loud. It was the soft scrape of chairs against the courtroom floor, the rustle of paper being stacked and restacked, the kind of quiet noise that fills a room where people are pretending this is just another weekday. The county courthouse sat in a small city in Northern California. Pale stone outside, fluorescent lights inside. Nothing dramatic about it at all. And yet, that was where my family decided to turn me into a problem that needed to be managed. My name is Claire Whitman. I was 49 years old in the spring of 2025, and I was sitting at a long wooden table while a judge prepared to hear arguments about whether I could be trusted. I kept my hands folded in front of me, not because I was nervous, but because I had learned that stillness makes people underestimate you. Across the aisle sat my younger brother, Ryan. He looked comfortable, almost relaxed, like he belonged there. His suit was new, his posture straight. Beside him sat his wife, Hannah, her expression carefully neutral, eyes lowered just enough to seem respectful. Behind them was my mother. Margaret Whitman was 72 years old and had spent most of her life avoiding conflict. She was very good at it. She sat behind Ryan, not beside me, and that was the first thing that told me how this day was going to unfold. When I glanced back, she did not meet my eyes. She stared straight ahead, hands clasped tightly in her lap. The clerk called the case, a civil trust dispute involving the estate of my late father, Thomas Whitman. Hearing those words spoken out loud felt surreal. My father had been gone for 3 years, long enough, I thought, for grief to soften. I had not expected it to sharpen into this. The judge began with a summary: allegations of mismanagement, allegations of breach of fiduciary duty, allegations that I had failed to act in the best interest of the family trust. Family. The word landed heavier than any legal term. I had not worked at Whitman Freight since 2014. That fact was established immediately by Ryan's attorney, a man with a smooth voice and a way of speaking that sounded reasonable, even when it was cutting. He explained that I had chosen to pursue an independent career, that I had distanced myself from day-to-day operations, that my absence demonstrated a lack of commitment. He did not mention why I had been there in the first place. When my father's health began to decline, it was gradual. Missed appointments, confusion over invoices, a tax payment filed twice. I was the one who noticed. I was the one who stepped in quietly and fixed things without making it an issue. I had the background. Finance was my profession. Risk, compliance, structure. I handled it because someone needed to. None of that was mentioned. Instead, Ryan's attorney painted a picture of a sister who walked away, who made herself unavailable, who could not be trusted to safeguard something as important as a family legacy. Ryan sat there nodding along. Then came the first request. Ryan's attorney asked the court for a temporary order restricting my access to all trust-related documents and accounts while the case proceeded. He framed it as a precaution, a neutral step, a way to protect assets from potential harm. The judge considered it briefly and granted the request. Just like that, I was removed. I felt my chest tighten, not in panic, but in recognition. This had been coming. The paperwork was simply catching up to decisions already made. My attorney glanced at me. I gave a small shake of my head. Not yet. Then my mother stood up. She moved slowly, as if every step required permission. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. She told the court that she had signed a full power of attorney in favor of Ryan in 2019. She said it was done during a time of uncertainty. She said she believed it was the most stable option for the family. Stable. That was the word she chose. She did not look at me once. The judge asked if the authorization was voluntary. She said yes. The judge asked if she understood what she was signing. She said she trusted her son. I felt something hollow open inside me. Not anger, something colder. I remembered how that year had felt, how information had slowly stopped reaching me, how meetings happened without my knowledge, how questions were answered vaguely or not at all. I told myself it was distance, that I had stepped away, that this was the natural result. Now I understood it had been engineered. As the hearing continued, I listened to my life summarized in ways that felt almost fictional, that I was absent, that I was disengaged, that I was no longer aligned with family interests. No one mentioned the nights I stayed up reconciling accounts. No one mentioned the personal funds I had advanced when cash flow tightened. No one mentioned the trust documents my father had asked me to safeguard. I was not surprised. I was disappointed in a way that felt older than the room. When the judge adjourned that day, the tension lifted immediately for everyone else. Chairs scraped back, voices returned to normal volume. Ryan laughed at something his attorney said. Hannah gathered her things without looking up. My mother walked past me without stopping. I remained seated for a moment after the room emptied, not because I was overwhelmed, but because I needed to acknowledge what had just happened. I had not lost standing today. I had lost the illusion that I ever truly had it. Outside, the afternoon sun was bright and unremarkable. Cars passed, a couple argued quietly near the steps. Life continued with no regard for the fact that something fundamental had shifted inside me. I stood there and understood something with complete clarity. I had not been removed because I was careless or incompetent. I had been removed because I was inconvenient, because I asked questions, because I did not fit the version of family that required silence. I had crossed an invisible line years ago when I chose independence over obedience, when I stopped being useful on demand, when I built a life that did not revolve around keeping everyone else comfortable. And now that choice was being used as evidence against me. I did not feel the urge to fight, not yet. I felt something steadier than anger, awareness. I walked to my car knowing this was not the beginning of a battle, but the beginning of understanding how carefully things had been arranged long before I ever sat in that courtroom.
Chapter 2. When I was useful and then conveniently erased. The past kept replaying in my head on the drive home, not like a movie, more like a ledger you cannot close until every line makes sense. In 2010, Whitman Freight was still a small operation tucked behind a row of auto shops and tire stores, the kind of place that smelled like diesel and coffee and overheated copy paper. My father, Thomas Whitman, came in most mornings wearing the same worn jacket, carrying the same thermos, greeting the same drivers by name. He liked routine. It made him feel in control. That is why I noticed the first crack. It was a Thursday in late summer. I stopped by after work to drop off a folder of tax documents he had asked for. When I walked into his office, he was staring at an open invoice like it was written in another language. He looked up and smiled too quickly. "You got the papers?" he said. "I did," I replied. "Did you send the quarterly payment already?" His smile faltered. "I was going to," he said. "I just need to check something first." He tapped the desk with his pen, then asked me a question he had asked 2 days earlier, almost word for word. My stomach tightened. People forget things sometimes. That is normal. But my father did not forget numbers. He built his whole life on remembering them. I pulled a chair up and sat down. "Let me take a look," I said. He hesitated, pride flashing in his eyes, then let the papers slide toward me. From that day on, I started coming by more often. At first, it was just to help him organize receipts and invoices. Then it became payroll, then vendor payments, then tax filings. I did not announce any of it.
I simply did it because someone had to, and because I could. My brother, Ryan, was already deep into his own vision of the company. He wanted new routes, bigger contracts, more trucks. He did not want to sit at a desk and reconcile accounts. He treated spreadsheets like an insult. One afternoon, he walked into the office holding a shoebox full of crumpled receipts. He set it on my father's desk like a joke. "Your girl can sort this," he said, nodding at me. "She loves this stuff." My father gave a tired chuckle, the kind of laugh people use to keep peace. I looked at Ryan and kept my voice calm. "I do not love it," I said. "I'm doing it so we don't get penalized." Ryan lifted his hands as if I were being dramatic. "See," he said, "this is why you should just handle it. You're the serious one." That was the pattern. Ryan played the visionary, I played the fixer. My mother praised the growth and thanked the person making it look easy. On Sunday dinners, my mother asked Ryan about new clients and expansion plans, her eyes bright with pride. "How many trucks now?" she would ask. Ryan would grin. "Give it a year," he would say. "We'll double the fleet." Then she would turn to me, not with pride but with expectation. "Did you file the payroll taxes?" she would ask. "Your father gets stressed about those." I would nod. "Already done," I would say. My father would pat my arm softly, grateful but quiet, as if gratitude should not be spoken too loudly or it might change the balance of things. In early 2013, my father invited me to lunch at a little diner near the yard. He was slower then, his shoulders a bit heavier, his eyes a bit more tired. Halfway through the meal, he set his fork down and stared out the window for a long moment. "You're the only one who sees the whole picture," he said. I blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" I asked. He looked back at me. "Ryan sees growth," he said. "Your mother sees peace. You see the structure, the pieces that keep everything from collapsing." I swallowed. "I'm just helping," I said. He leaned forward slightly. "I need you to keep certain things safe," he said. "Trust documents, original filings, anything tied to the family trust. Do not assume anyone else will handle it carefully." I felt a chill move down my spine. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. He lowered his voice. "Because your brother can be careless when he thinks something belongs to him," he said, "and because people do strange things when they get scared." The next morning, he sent me an email from his office computer. It was short, careful, and it stayed in my inbox like a sealed envelope I never wanted to open. "Keep copies of the trust papers. Keep them somewhere safe. Do not let anyone rush you. Love, Dad." I never showed it to anyone, not Ryan, not my mother. It felt like something my father was entrusting me alone, and I treated it that way. In 2014, I made a choice that later became the easiest weapon against me. I left the company. Not because I stopped caring, but because I was exhausted. I had my own career in risk and compliance, and I had been doing 2 jobs for years. I wanted a life that didn't revolve around emergency calls and late-night spreadsheets. The day I told my family, we were sitting in my parents' kitchen. My father looked down at his coffee. Ryan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "You're really leaving," Ryan said. "I'm stepping back from daily operations. I'll still help Dad with personal finances, and I can answer questions, but I can't keep running this behind the scenes." Ryan shook his head like I had betrayed him personally. "You always do this," he said. "You always bail when it gets real." "It's been real for years," I said quietly. My mother reached for my hand. "You need to do what makes you happy," she said, but her tone carried a faint edge, like happiness was a selfish luxury. My father finally looked up. "You'll still check in," he said. "I will," I promised. And I did. For a while, things stayed normal. I handled what I could from a distance. I reviewed taxes. I answered questions. I reminded my father about deadlines. I kept copies of key documents. I stayed available. Then, slowly, the flow of information changed. In 2016, I realized I was hearing about decisions after they were made. In 2017, I noticed I was no longer copied on emails. In 2018, when I asked for updated financial statements, Ryan sent me a one-page summary instead of the full reports. "Everything is fine," he said on the phone. "You don't need to worry about details." "I'm not worried," I replied. "I need clarity." "You always need control," he said, and laughed like it was harmless. When I brought it up with my mother, she sounded tired. "Ryan is doing his best," she said. "You left, Claire. You can't expect to be in every conversation." "I'm not asking to control it," I said. "I'm asking to understand what is happening with Dad's trust." There was a pause. "He said you get worked up," she said. "He said it's better for your peace not to be involved." Peace, that word again. Always peace for everyone else, always silence from me. One evening, after another vague call, I opened my laptop and pulled up the old trust files I had saved. I read the language my father insisted, the checks and balances, the limits on leveraging, the requirement for transparency. None of it worked if someone controlled the information. That's when the truth settled in, not as rage, but as recognition. I had not been pushed out because I was absent. I had been pushed out because I was inconvenient, because I would have noticed too soon, because my questions would have slowed the kind of decisions Ryan wanted to make quickly. I scrolled to that email from 2013 and read it again, word for word, feeling my father's voice in every careful sentence. "Do not let anyone rush you." I closed the laptop and stared at the dark reflection of my face in the screen. By the time 2019 arrived, I had stopped asking for updates, not because I trusted them, but because I could feel the door had already closed. And now, sitting with the memory of my mother standing in court, I couldn't stop thinking about what happened in that exact year and how deliberate it suddenly looked.
Chapter 3. Numbers don't take sides. They tell the truth. Clarity changed the way I moved through the days that followed. The morning after I stopped asking for permission in my own mind, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and a legal pad beside it. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every thought sound louder than it should. I reminded myself to breathe slowly, the way I used to when things felt overwhelming at work. One line at a time, one number at a time. If my name was going to be dragged through a courtroom, I needed to know exactly what they were hiding behind words like stability and family. I started with what I already had: old statements saved in folders labeled by year, spreadsheets I had created back when my father still trusted me with the details, notes scribbled in the margins about payments that felt off even then, but had not raised alarms without context. I realized quickly that I could not do this alone, not because I lacked the skill, but because I needed distance. I needed someone who had no history with my family and no reason to soften the truth. I called Kevin Moore. We had worked together years ago when I was consulting full-time. Kevin was an independent forensic accountant, the kind who moved slowly and asked uncomfortable questions. He answered on the third ring. "Kevin Moore," he said. "It is Claire Whitman," I replied. "I need help." There was a brief pause. "That does not sound casual," he said. "It is not," I said. "I need a clean review of trust-related transactions from 2018 through 2021. Another pause, longer this time. "Why those years?" he asked. "Because that is when I stopped being included," I said, "and because I think that is when everything changed." "Send me what you have," he said. "I will tell you what the numbers say, not what anyone wants them to say." I spent the rest of the morning scanning documents and uploading files. Some of them were incomplete. Some of them ended abruptly where access had stopped. Still, patterns do not need perfection to reveal themselves. While Kevin worked, I made another call. The regional bank my father had used for years was still there, still staffed by familiar names. I asked for Sophia Lynn, a relationship manager I had worked with countless times before. She sounded surprised when she heard my voice. "It has been a while," she said.
How is your family? Complicated, I replied. I am trying to understand some old transactions. She hesitated. I cannot disclose anything directly, she said carefully, but I can tell you where to look. That was all I needed. She mentioned an account I did not recognize, tied to a limited liability company I had never seen before. The name sounded ordinary enough to be invisible. I wrote it down and felt the first real flicker of something close to certainty. Kevin called me 2 days later. Your father's medical expenses are used repeatedly as justification for withdrawals, he said, but the amounts do not match the reality of his coverage. I closed my eyes. He had comprehensive insurance, I said. Out-of-pocket costs were minimal. Exactly. Yet the withdrawals continue. Same amounts, same intervals. So where did the money go? I asked. There was a brief silence. To a corporate entity, he said, an LLC registered under Hannah Whitman name. I felt the air leave my lungs, slowly and quietly. Hannah, my sister-in-law, always agreeable, always present, but never vocal, the last person anyone would suspect of involvement. Are you sure? I asked. I do not guess, Kevin said. I verify. He was not finished. There's more, he continued. In 2020, there's evidence of a loan secured against trust assets. My fingers curled against the edge of the table. A loan? I repeated. Yes, he said, to Whitman Freight, used as expansion capital. The room felt smaller. The trust language was clear. No leveraging, no personal or business benefit, no unilateral decisions. I thanked Kevin and ended the call. Then I sat there staring at nothing, letting the implications settle. This was not sloppiness. This was design. That afternoon, I pulled out the trust document my father had emailed me years earlier. I read the clause again, slower this time, hearing his voice in my head as if he were sitting across from me at that diner. Do not let anyone rush you. I decided to call Ryan. He answered on the second ring, his voice already guarded. What do you want? He asked. Did you take a loan against the trust? I said. There was a pause long enough to feel deliberate. It was temporary, he replied. We needed liquidity during expansion. Everyone benefited. Everyone? I repeated. Or just the company? You are not involved anymore, he snapped. You wouldn't understand how business works now. I understand contracts, and I understand when someone crosses a line. He exhaled sharply. You left, he said. You chose that. I chose to stop being invisible, not to be erased. He ended the call. Later that evening, Kevin sent me another file, a scanned document labeled as a family meeting summary from mid-2020. It authorized the loan. It listed attendees. It included signatures. Mine was typed neatly at the bottom, unsigned. I stared at the page, my name sitting there like a prop, like proof of consent that never existed. I called my mother. Her voice sounded tired. Ryan said everything was approved, she said when I asked about the meeting. I asked, did you attend? Yes, she replied. He said the company needed help to grow. Did he say the trust would be used? I asked. There was a brief pause. He said it was safe, she said. I trusted him. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse. I listened. When the call ended, I sat in the dark and felt something inside me settle into place. Not anger, not sadness, certainty. This was not miscommunication. This was architecture. Decisions layered carefully, justified with paperwork, insulated by silence. The trust had not been treated like a responsibility, it had been treated like a resource. Late that night, I turned on my printer and watched a single page slide out, a clean summary of transactions, dates, amounts, destinations, one page that told the entire story without commentary or emotion. I held it in my hands and felt no rush of triumph, only calm. For the first time since my father died, the confusion lifted. The gaps closed. The narrative they had offered the court did not collapse, it simply dissolved. I placed the page in a folder and set it on my desk, not as a weapon, as a fact, and for the first time since October, that felt like enough.
Chapter 4. Silence, when backed by proof, changes the room. Enough did not mean finished. It meant I could walk back into that courtroom without shrinking. The second hearing came a week later. Same county courthouse, same pale walls, same benches polished by years of quiet arguments. I arrived early, not to claim space, but to settle into it. The folder rested against my side like a reminder, not a shield. I was not there to persuade anyone emotionally. I was there to let facts do what they always do when given room. Ryan was already seated when I entered. He looked different this time, not defeated, but unsettled. His confidence had sharpened into tension, his knee bouncing under the table as his attorney whispered urgently beside him. Hannah sat rigidly, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She did not look at me. My mother arrived moments later and slipped into a seat at the end of the row. She glanced at me briefly, then away, as if eye contact itself carried risk. When the judge entered, the room fell quiet in a way that felt heavier than before. Proceedings resumed without ceremony. Ryan's attorney stood first, his voice louder than necessary, repeating the same narrative with more force. He spoke of abandonment, of betrayal, of a sister who chose her own interests over her family. He described my absence as proof of indifference, my independence as evidence of disloyalty. She walked away, he said, and now she questions decisions she no longer had a right to influence. I listened without interrupting. I watched the judge write, pause, then write again. I kept my breathing even. When it was my turn, my attorney stood but did not argue character. He did not respond to emotion with emotion. He acknowledged the statements, then asked permission to submit additional documentation. The judge nodded. I stood slowly, aware of every movement. Not because I was nervous, but because stillness demands attention. I placed the folder on the table between us. "Your Honor," my attorney said, "this is a consolidated financial summary of trust-related activity from 2018 through 2021. Ryan shifted in his seat. The documents were handed forward. I remained standing, hands relaxed at my sides. My attorney began with the simplest facts. Transfers labeled as medical expenses, repeated amounts, regular intervals. He spoke calmly, letting the pattern speak for itself. Mr. Whitman's medical coverage was comprehensive, he said. Actual costs were significantly lower than the amounts withdrawn. Ryan's attorney objected, his voice sharp. "Speculation," he said. "Verification," my attorney replied, without raising his voice. "These figures are drawn from insurer statements and bank records." The judge held up a hand. The objection was noted and dismissed. Then came the next layer. "In addition," my attorney continued, "the trust explicitly prohibits leveraging for business expansion, yet these funds were used to finance growth at Whitman Freight during that period." He paused, then added quietly, "The receiving entity for several transfers was a limited liability company registered to Hannah Whitman." The room shifted. Hannah's face drained of color. Ryan turned toward her sharply. "What is he talking about?" he whispered. She shook her head, lips parted, but no words came out. The judge leaned back slightly. "Ms. Whitman," he said, addressing Hannah, "were you aware of these transfers?" She swallowed hard. "I signed what I was told to sign. I trusted my husband." Ryan stood abruptly. "This is irrelevant. She was not involved in management." "Sit down," the judge said firmly. Ryan did. Then my mother spoke. No one asked her to. She simply stood, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. "I knew he needed money." Every head turned. Her voice wavered, but she did not stop. "When I signed the authorization in 2019, she said, Ryan told me the company needed help to grow. He said it would benefit everyone."
Ryan stared at her in disbelief. "You said you did not know," he said. She looked at him, then at the floor. "I knew he needed it," she repeated. "I did not know it would be done like this." Silence filled the room, thick and unmistakable. The judge cleared his throat. "Thank you," he said. "That will be sufficient." He ordered a temporary suspension of proceedings and authorized an independent financial investigation. His tone was measured, but the shift was undeniable. The story had changed, not because anyone raised their voice, but because the structure underneath it had cracked. Ryan's attorney leaned in to whisper urgently. Ryan shook his head, jaw clenched, eyes darted. The confidence he had worn like armor no longer fit. I sat down slowly. My hands were steady. As people stood and gathered their things, the air felt different. Conversations hushed, eyes lingered. The weight had moved. My mother looked at me then, really looked. Her eyes were wet, uncertain, searching for something I could not give her in that moment. I met her gaze, neither forgiving nor condemning, and let it pass. Outside the courtroom, Ryan caught up with me near the steps. "You planned this," he said. "You wanted to humiliate me. I brought facts. You brought assumptions. You could have handled this privately. I tried. You stopped listening." He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. There was nothing left to say that would make things worse. I walked down the courthouse steps into the afternoon light. Traffic hummed nearby, indifferent and steady. The world moved on, as it always does. For the first time since this began, I felt something close to calm. Not victory, not relief, just the certainty that my silence, when backed by proof, had finally changed the room.
Chapter 5. The kind of revenge that doesn't poison you. Because I stopped holding it together, everything that had been balanced on my silence finally had to stand on its own. The investigation did not arrive with drama. It arrived as emails, phone calls, document requests, and deadlines. A neutral accounting firm was appointed by the court, not to interpret intentions, but to trace movement. Money does not lie when it is followed carefully. It only reveals who assumed no one ever would. 3 weeks later, my attorney called while I was sitting in my car outside a grocery store, a list of things I did not need folded in my lap. I watched people walk in and out with bags of produce and cereal, living lives untouched by court filings and family collapse. "They confirmed the violations," he said. "Unauthorized use of trust funds, improper loans secured against the trust, conflict of interest." I closed my eyes. "What happens next?" I asked. "Restitution," he replied. "Ryan will be ordered to repay the withdrawn funds. He is removed from any authority over the trust. Whitman Freight will undergo a formal audit. The loan is unwound." I nodded even though he could not see me. "And Hannah?" I asked. "There will be questions," he said carefully. "Her company received the funds. Whether she knowingly facilitated the transfers will be examined." I ended the call and sat there longer than necessary. I waited for something to rise in me. Satisfaction. Victory. Anger finally justified. What came instead was quiet. The final hearing was brief. No speeches, no grandstanding, just findings read into the record and orders issued with calm precision. Ryan sat rigidly at the table, his confidence replaced by something brittle. Hannah kept her eyes down, hands folded tightly as if stillness might make her disappear. My mother arrived late and took a seat near the back. She looked smaller than I remembered, not diminished by age, but by the weight of realization. The judge spoke plainly. The misuse of funds was confirmed. The trust was restructured under independent administration. Whitman Freight was ordered to comply with a full audit. Ryan's authority was revoked. When the judge asked if there were questions, Ryan's attorney stood, hesitated, then sat back down. There were none that mattered. In the hallway afterward, Ryan approached me slowly, like he was unsure which version of me he was allowed to speak to. "You got what you wanted," he said. I looked at him and saw not just a brother who made reckless decisions, but a man who had confused entitlement with inheritance. This was never about wanting, I said. It was about accuracy. You always had to be right, he muttered. I had to be honest, I replied. He shook his head and walked away without another word. No apology, no admission, just distance. It felt appropriate. That evening, messages began to arrive. Family members I had not heard from in years, old acquaintances, people offering sympathy or asking what really happened. Whitman Freight had become a topic of conversation, and when companies are audited, stories travel quickly. I did not respond. 2 days later, my mother called. Her voice was hesitant, careful. "Can we talk?" she asked. We met at a small diner off the highway, the kind of place with worn booths and endless coffee refills. She was already seated when I arrived, hands wrapped around a mug like it was an anchor. "I thought we could handle this in the family," she said. I sat across from her. "You did," I said, "just without me." Her shoulders sagged. "I was scared," she admitted. "After your father got sick, everything felt unstable. Ryan sounded so sure. You were busy. You had your own life." "I did," I said, "but I was never absent." She looked down. "He said you would take everything," she whispered. "He said you would sell the company and leave us with nothing." "And you believed him," I said gently. She nodded, tears slipping free. "I wanted peace," she said. "I know," I replied, "but peace built on silence always breaks." She asked what I wanted now. The question hung between us heavier than any accusation. "I want the trust to do what Dad intended," I said. Her brow furrowed. "It is still money, still paperwork." "It is meaning," I replied. "It was never meant to be leverage." I told her about the plan my attorney and I had drafted. The scholarship fund, a logistics and supply chain program at a state college nearby, support for students who could not afford tuition but had the discipline to finish, a way to honor my father's work without turning it into a weapon. "You would give it away?" she said. "I would redirect it," I replied, "so no one can misuse it again." "And you?" she asked. "You would not take anything?" I shook my head. "I am stepping back," I said. "I do not want to spend my life negotiating love with legal documents." She reached across the table, then stopped short. "Can you forgive me?" she asked. I considered the question carefully. "I am not here to punish you," I said. "The truth already did what it needed to do." We sat in silence as the waitress refilled our cups. Ordinary sounds filled the space. Plates clinking, a radio playing softly somewhere near the kitchen, life continuing without waiting for closure. When I left, the sky was dimming into evening. I sat in my car and felt something loosen inside my chest. Not relief, not reconciliation. Freedom. Weeks later, the scholarship paperwork was finalized. The trust was restructured. Whitman Freight completed its audit. Ryan lost his authority and much of his reputation. The consequences were loud for him and quiet for me. I did not return to family dinners. I did not rebuild relationships on top of broken trust. I built boundaries and kept them. That was the kind of revenge that didn't poison me, not taking something from them, but refusing to let them take anything more from me. My peace, my credibility, my sense of self. If you have ever been erased by the people who were supposed to protect you, remember this. Silence, backed by truth, is the strongest voice you will ever need. And if this story stayed with you, tell me where you were listening from and what part felt closest to home. I read more than people think, and I hope you stay for the next one.